This is the Florida Panhandle. Well, actually, it's a small neighborhood in a rural county in the Florida Panhandle. But it all kind of looks the same up here. Bunch of kind of poor people who keep to themselves. Probably like country music and Jesus. Good folks up here. This is kind of the last part of old Florida we have left. And boy, is it conservative up here. I bet if you ran the data, you'd see this is some of the most Republican turf in the United States. I spent 3 weeks driving around Florida in the spring of 2022. If there's a theme for that trip, it would be change, change, change. New homes, more people, and everything is just better. Haha, JK. If you've lived in Florida for a long time, you're probably sick of all the newcomers. Seems like the gig is up. After Texas, this is the most popular place for people to move. So I'm going to take you on my journey through Florida, beginning with where I started, in the Panhandle. I'll show you small beach towns, rednecks, ghettos, big fancy homes, all of it. And since politics is the biggest thing on people's minds now, that'll be the gator in our stew. Dang, look at this mess. This is South Beach. It is crazy now. Bites and drugs and drama. A lot of people here aren't very happy about this. And this isn't the only place where people in this state are frustrated. We'll come back to Miami later because the trip starts back up here in the Panhandle. And it is certainly not crazy up here. This is Bonifay, a neat little town of 2,700 people, kinda an hour or maybe less from Alabama. I spent my first day here when I got to Florida. To me, it looked just like a bunch of rednecks just living their lives. It's kind of beat up a little bit, but it's not sketchy or anything. I met some wonderful people at the town's local bar called Sam's Place. At Sam's, they blast country music, drink their beer, and play some damn pool. I think little dive bars like this are the best places in the South to spend your Friday nights. You got to try it when you come down here. It's a real treat. Most of the Panhandle's just like this. At least what I saw. Just kind of country beat up, sort of poor necky towns where everybody knows everybody's drama and most people have guns. I think you'd really have to be an asshole up here to piss anybody off, though. Or mouth off about the benefits of immigration. I'm glad I stopped here first, because it would set the tone for my experience in the rest of the state, especially when it comes to the politics. In case you didn't know, Florida's become one of the most hardcore conservative states of all now. Most of that's because of what happened during COVID, when all the mask mandates and school closings happened. But Florida stayed open, and its governor Ron DeSantis has emerged as a hero to conservatives and is also a potential presidential candidate. They love him up here, I'll tell you that. Now, after I left the Panhandle's rural hickland, I went over to Pensacola and Panama City. That's also in the Panhandle. They call this whole stretch of beach the Redneck Riviera. I don't think it's actually very redneck at all, outside of some of the parties in Panama City. Yeah, it's pretty sketch over in Panama City, and people still cause drama, but it's not as bad as it was years ago. I have to say, though, these poor people. A lot of Panama City is all torn up from a hurricane that came through here 4 years prior. It's still all jacked up. I think people still live in some of these homes. Some are probably still waiting on insurance. Pensacola also has a really rough part of town. This is West Pensacola, and it looks pretty bad after a rainstorm. Maybe it's the dirt and the puddles everywhere, but it's pretty dreary here. Downtown Pensacola is nice, though. This is a military town, so there's a lot of pride in this part of town. I happened to catch it on a weekend, so there were a lot of people about. And Pensacola Beach is just pretty laid back, actually. It's really quiet and clean. Definitely not sketch. I kind of liked Pensacola Beach. Now there's pockets of the Panhandle that are somewhat liberal, though. This is Tallahassee, the state capital. This county is very liberal, which is kind of funny because it's the capital and the state is very much not liberal. But I like Tallahassee. The downtown area is really nice and feels southern. There's enough to do here to keep you busy, but it's not crazy like it is down in Miami. I didn't see a lot of homeless people or sketchy people wandering around. That's good. I think it's pretty safe here too. I mean, it's not safe, but I went into Tallahassee's supposedly worst neighborhood, and it wasn't actually that bad at all. Kind of reminds me of where I grew up. Except for the maybe gunshot I heard when I was driving around.
Your destination is head east on Osceola Street, Daisy Street. In a quarter mile.
When we had the elections in 2022, a lot of the country didn't vote as red as people expected. But here in Florida, they did in big numbers. People are now wondering what the future holds for liberals in Florida anymore. So driving around here, there's a lot of energy in the air. The kind of newcomers are all fired up because they feel justified in moving here. And then there's all these new people moving in. After I left the Panhandle, I went down to North Middle Florida, aka the housing development wasteland. Everything here from Ocala to Orlando to almost Tampa is where most of the new homes are going in. Everywhere you turn up here, there's new homes and construction trucks on the highways. The people who have lived in this part of the state their whole lives hate it. But there's just really not a lot of room left in Florida anymore. They gotta build somewhere. This is one of the first times that all the new people moving here aren't just old rich people. Lots of families are coming down here from all over the country, especially the Northeast. Politics-wise, this part of Florida is pretty mixed. This is one of the last kind of liberal parts of Florida right now. The new families moving in aren't as hardcore conservative as they once were. Yet, just wait till they get used to how much better it is here than in Pennsylvania. The biggest thing people are fired up about is schools. There's a big political debate here about what the schools can and can't teach. Turns out parents get really upset when you try to teach their kids about gay stuff. The only outlier to this big liberal chunk of Florida is this giant community smack dab in the middle of all this sprawl. It's very old and very conservative here. That's them throwing a big Trump parade a few years back. The Villages is this massive housing development thing with a self-contained city inside. There's 71,000 households here. It's mostly gated and super safe and really clean. It's very vanilla. Old rich people love it. They play golf, tennis, cribbage, all that old people stuff. And then they drink and frolic and date binge. It's like a big party down here. I talked to a couple of people who live here. One of them moved here from New York, and he says he's never been happier.
Doing line dancing, exercise classes, what have you, bunch of nice people.
But Ralph's neighbor offered a different take. She seemed afraid to speak out about her frustrations with Village's higher-ups, and she actually asked me to blur her face out.
Also, the roads are more crowded and congested. Let's see, another thing is, do you already know about the gated community thing?
I'm pretty sure somebody recognized her voice, though. It is a small place. She never told me if she got outed, though. I wonder if she did. Florida has lots of old communities like this, but none are as big and impactful as the Villages is. Now, perhaps the craziest place I saw in Florida was in Pasco County. I kept hearing about Pasco County and how trashy it was, so I had to see it, and boy is it interesting. A lot of Pasco County is pretty rural like this, but I stumbled into a section of the county where a bunch of people were living in the woods. A lot of these people here just want to be left alone, and they've even had to defend themselves from outsiders coming in to try to rob them. They're even trying to raise their own funds so they can pave their roads. They kind of feel hung out to dry here, and they're even worried about future housing developments coming in and forcing them to sell their land. Good folks out here. A bit of an alternative lifestyle, though. And how do you think these people vote? I'll give you one guess. So everybody knows about the Keys, but this is Cedar Key, a tiny little island nation a couple of miles off the coast, way out in the middle of nowhere. There's only 700 people who live on this little spit of land, and they all know each other very well. There's a cool little downtown area where folks get together and talk about the problems of the world. Most of this island's just middle-class folks who just want to slow down a bit. I like it here a lot. You feel like you're in some Caribbean country, but everybody here speaks English, and nobody's trying to rip you off. My favorite part of Cedar Key is the main street right along the water. It's easy to forget about your woes, having some drinks on a patio like this, I tell you. The coolest part of Cedar Key isn't what's here now, it's what happened a long time ago. They have this little airport where all the rich people park. But back in the day, one of the town's business owners was using this airport to smuggle coke in from Colombia, and he got away with it for years. And what are the politics of Cedar Key? Who cares? We stopped here to forget about all that. Just down the coast is another island community, but this place is way different. A few miles from Sarasota is this fancy little elite town called Siesta Key. You've probably heard of Siesta Key before. That's because many publications that know what they're talking about have called this the best beach in the country. I thought it was very nice. The water had that bright blue turquoise color that you see in all the magazine spreads. The sand here is very soft and white, as demonstrated to me by Siesta Key's most famous lifeguard, a guy they call Scooter. What are we comparing here? Oh,
This is Panhandle sand,
okay.
and this is Siesta sand.
Yeah. There's just enough to keep you busy here. Fun little places to eat and drink and frolic and laugh. It's really expensive to live here, though. I hear there's nothing under $1 million here anymore. But it's one of the safest, cleanest little vacation lands you'll find in this state. They do a really good job of keeping the place nice, I have to say. There's a lot of rich, older people here, so it's a lot more conservative here than it was up the coast in Cedar Key. It sort of has the same voting demographics here as in the lower keys. Conservative leaning, but not all in your face about it. But of course there's drama here. This is Florida and all. Today's drama is people fighting over how many new hotels they're going to put in. Now, one place I really liked was the Tampa St. Pete area. I thought St. Petersburg was just a neat little city. It's fairly clean and pretty safe. But a lot of people want to live here now, so the cost of living here is through the damn roof. There's just nowhere left to build on this peninsula. I went to St. Pete's bad areas, and they looked better than where I'm from. St. Pete Beach is actually really chill. I don't know if I caught it on a good week, but it was May, and it wasn't too crazy. Except for the drunk chick I saw throw her used tampon at a passing car. That was gross. Tampa's put a lot of money and effort into making itself better. The downtown waterfront area is the kind of place you want to take a selfie at. This is all new. And driving around downtown, you don't see tents and bums everywhere. You actually don't see that a lot anywhere in Florida. I think they run them off into the woods. Because I know there's a ton of homeless here. They just hide them well. This is a Tampa neighborhood called Eber City. Back in the day, this was a dump, but it's all fixed up now too. I went to Tampa's bad area, and it's kind of bad. I hear they're slowly gentrifying all of this. The bad part of town on the north end is one of the few parts of the Tampa metro area that doesn't support conservatives. And look at the houses here. They're really lucky to have a nice home like this along the water. Tampa's a really nice place. But all the people who live here are pretty pissed about how fast it's growing. A lot of people can't afford to live here anymore. Now there are some really lousy parts of South Central Florida. I saw a lot of rural poverty. I went to Immokalee, which is just about 100% immigrants who work in the fields. It's pretty run down here, but it's not a permanent place for most people. They get here, they work their asses off, and then they try to save money so they can get the hell out of here. I talked to one guy who lives here, and he's optimistic about his future.
I hear a lot of sad stories about Immokalee, but like I look around, I'm seeing people with their own business and, you know, their own houses, and I mean, I don't think it's a sad story.
Florida City's been called the most dangerous place in the state, so I had to see that. And yeah, it's pretty bleak here. A lot of people here are into drugs or gangs or are very poor. It was pretty empty the afternoon I drove through, but I can imagine at night it has its moments. The mayor of Florida City told me he is fed up.
But when there's crime there, I want us to take it to the max because I need the people to feel secure. And once the people feel secure, they'll be able to talk more, they'll be able to be more, and they'll be able to do more for themselves.
I also saw Pahokee and Belglade. They're also super poor and dangerous. Both of them are filled with folks who work the fields or who used to work the fields. This was possibly the most depressing stop on the road trip. In all these poverty pockets, they rely on the government, so they're going to vote lib. But a majority of the rural areas down in South Central Florida are all very conservative.
Some people in Florida are worried. They think their governor is going to run for president and leave them forever.
I get their concern, Mappy. I'd be worried too. I wouldn't want to lose him as my governor. Do you think he can become our next president? Do you think he'll win?
As long as he runs against Joe Biden, he will. That guy could screw up a pastrami sandwich.
Right now at their Fort Lauderdale factory showroom or online at benjewelers.com. Beverly's Jewelers. For South Florida, it's engaged.
Aw, Miami. It's a changing down here, I tell ya. This used to be the murder capital of like everywhere back when cocaine was a thing. But most of the drug cartels bring fentanyl in across the Mexico border now because they've realized our junkies can afford that crap. I went into pockets in North Miami that used to be just tragic, but they're cleaning most of Miami's slums up pretty well. A lot of this is just quiet Hispanics for the most part. The only really bad part I saw here was a neighborhood called Liberty City. That was bad, I have to say. But that's just about it. Miami has all these new tech companies that have moved in. Since, you know, stuff doesn't close down here. There aren't homeless people pooping on sidewalks. It's actually very clean in Miami, I have to say. Anyways, Miami is actually a really nice place to live these days. If you can afford it. Most of those who cannot have left the Miami area forever and have settled into areas we saw earlier. We saw Miami Beach at the beginning of the video. This all used to be very popular for spring breakers, and then South Beach got pretty run down. Then they fixed the place up, and now party people are coming in again. Although some of the new people coming in are causing all sorts of problems in South Beach. Apparently, they've tried raising prices on booze and hotels to try to deter the troublemakers from coming down here. And they've called those practices racist. Never a dull moment in Miami. Never a dull moment in Florida. Miami's more conservative than you might think. Sure, it still votes blue, but a lot of the Cubans and other Hispanic groups that settle here have rejected the agenda that the far left is pushing these days. Can't blame them, can you? It's pockets like Miami that are making Florida even more conservative than it's ever been. Further up the coast is West Palm Beach and Palm Beach. West Palm is kind of loud and obnoxious, but across the bridge over in Palm Beach, it is not that. It's all filled with mansions and fancy shopping and beaches with people who have way more money than you and I do. Palm Beach is just about the richest place in the country now. And it's pretty liberal here. Except this place. That's Mar-a-Lago. You know who owns this joint. He's definitely not a Democrat. I stopped at 2 other places along Florida's Atlantic coast. This is Daytona Beach. It's pretty run down in a lot of places and very dangerous. It's one of the few places in Florida where you have high crime and poverty, but most people vote conservative. Daytona Beach is also having trouble drawing in tourists these days. After they kicked all the spring breakers out in the early 90s, they've been trying to figure out a way to get them to come back. Some residents here don't want them to come back. Like, ever. I think if they want vacationers to return, they're going to have to fix the place up some and lower the crime rate quite a bit. And finally, we come to Jacksonville, home to nearly 1 million people. You may not know it, but this was the 3rd largest conservative city in the country for a long time. For like ever, this was home to conservative politics. But a lot of the rich conservative white families have headed to the burbs in neighboring counties now. And the people that are coming in are younger and more diverse. It's one of the few pockets in Florida that's voting more liberal these days. Good for you guys. And of course, when I was in Jacksonville, I had to see the bad side of town. You YouTube people always want to see that. And I can say, yes, a lot of West Jacksonville is really dangerous and parts of it are really run down. But it's nothing compared to some of the worst ghetto areas I've ever seen. So that's it. A whirlwind tour of the state of Florida. And it is changing a lot here, mister. And with all the new laws and all the new people moving in, you can expect change to be the only thing that isn't changing down here. But no matter what Florida becomes politically, it'll never be the same old Florida again. And that's not good. Now, there's only one person, I think, who could weigh in on this whole video and add perspective. I tried to get him to come on and talk to me about Florida and the future of Florida and Florida's politics and all. His people said no. That's okay. I didn't think he'd talk to little old me anyways. Are you looking to move and need advice? I do consulting. That's right. I'll sit down and talk about where the next perfect place for you and your family should be. I do it all the time. Together, let's find you a new home that's safe and checks all your boxes. And I can also help you find your new house, too. Email me and I'll work with you. I'm not just helping you figure out where to move, but I can help you find your perfect home, too. That's right. I know awesome, reliable agents all over the country, and I'd love to connect you to somebody who can help you search for that perfect home. Hey guys, if you learned something new about America or what it's like to live in America, great. You should think about subscribing and turning on your notifications. You can also click one of these videos or playlists for more.
This is Sage, Nick's manager. This has been a Corner House Entertainment production.